It's a bit like putting a baby in charge of a steamroller. If you're using AI in the wrong way, it can be super dangerous. And if your foundational rationale for why something is a good idea is wrong, you can waste a lot of money really quickly. Dow Jones is not there to disrupt that industry. It's there very much to use AI to empower and to enable both publishers, journalists, and also consumers.
Fundamental underlying question isn't correct because it's blinded by the science of AI. Then resources are deployed. People are trying to do things because they have the fear of missing out, and it becomes more of a psychological issue.
Some research recently showed that I think 73% of people cannot distinguish sophisticated deepfakes, and this is where the problem starts to emerge.
This week, Christopher Lomas from Dow Jones. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's get into this. We're going to call this one AI, Trust and the Future of Product Management. Let's start off with give the viewers a background of who you are and what you're up to.
Sure. Well, I mean, professionally, I started in banking and financial services. So the first 10 years started out at Lloyd's Bank on the trading floors. And then I went to Goldman Sachs after that, and American Express. Spent some time there. Ended up there running half the digital relationships we have with all of our network card members around the world. And then I spent 10 years in consulting, so working mainly in Marsh & McLennan companies, firstly at Mercer and then at Oliver Wyman. So the last 17 years has really been in digital product management, and the last 8 to 10 years has really been with a real specific focus on data science and AI. Somewhere in the middle of that, I raised some money, started a company, built a company, learned lots of lessons, and then moved on.
And also understand you have a podcast.
And we have a podcast, yeah. So the podcast was really, I suppose, a bit of an excuse as a creative outlet, but also a really great opportunity to have conversations with some really interesting people, senior leaders on topics that I think are really part of our evolving humanity. So we called it Humans and Machines, because it's really about the entanglement of humans and machines and what are the key topics that we should all be aware of.
Well, that's a good segue into exploring the premise of a number of elements we're going to talk about today. Obviously, AI is deemed new. We could argue it's also not new, but definitely in the current form, AI is the topic of the day, and I think the direction of so many aspects of life, business, culture moving forward. And obviously you've learned a huge amount in the background and the experience that you've got, and doing the podcast. I think it's a fascinating and valuable thing to do, to have conversations, to explore ideas, understand what it could mean, what the different perspectives are, because typically this is more so an academic world, particularly AI, but technology as such and software is not new. So there's going to be an intersection between the two. Let's delve a bit deeper into an area that you focus on very heavily, product management, digital product management. Just for the viewers, what does that mean?
Digital product management is really everything that you can think of in terms of creating products that other people can interact with. So that goes from the data layer all the way through to the now AI, data science and orchestration layers, up into the user interface and everything that's related to that in terms of how it goes to market, in terms of understanding your customers, taking on feedback, analyzing that. And then there's practical aspects to that as well, in terms of managing that development life cycle, creating great product requirements, really understanding your users and doing user research. So it's really that whole gambit when you talk about digital product management. I think also it's a fast evolving space, particularly with AI.
And how well do you think the methodology, the understanding of that entire process has and is being implemented within AI and AI products, especially within business? Obviously, from the Dow Jones perspective, but you've experienced with a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
But as of today, how do you see that understood by business and business leadership?
It's funny because there's a kind of theoretical answer to what is product management. And, you've got different flavors of that in terms of different methodologies, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, XP, etc. And there's the theoretical answer, and then there's the experiential answer. So you can learn how to do product management, you can learn how to do these agile methodologies, and then it hits the workplace. And then it's like, so how do you actually do product management when you're not in a garage, when it isn't 3 people just coding something, hacking something together and putting it out there and it's an overnight success, as seems to be, the sort of the popular stories. But when it actually lands inside an organization, how does it work? And so I think about that in really 5 different phases. So you start off with really wanting to understand the customer, understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. So it's the kind of the research and the strategy phase of, can you form a good hypothesis of what is the platform? And I think here with AI, there's obviously lots of advancements, right? You can get access to vast amounts of information that you couldn't do now. You can get a huge amount of sort of competitor intelligence that you couldn't have before. So in terms of how you can integrate AI into that first phase, there's just untold opportunity there. And the second piece is really one of the big differences in terms of, garage versus big corporate, highly matrixed organization, which is the kind of the feasibility phase, where you have a bunch of hypotheses, but then you have to say, like, within our company, is this going to work? And so you want to be making sure that you're talking to, HR, data privacy, the customer service teams, the go-to-market teams, the brand, the marketing, all of these sorts of people, right? And here again, you could use AI in lots of different ways. You could say, hey, I'm thinking about launching such and such a product. Who in data privacy might have an interest in some, what might be some of the new risks that we introduce into an organization like ours? So you can start to have that kind of hypothetical conversation. You can start to anticipate some of these things. And then you go into the solution design phase, right? So this is, I've got my hypothesis, I've checked that this is feasible, it's something that we can and should be doing. And then you go into this, okay, well, there might be the design element to that in terms of what might it look like, or, the prototyping side of it. And of course, now with vibe coding, with LLMs that can generate images, again, untold opportunity to very rapidly put some concepts together that you can put in front of people. And of course, what you want to do in product management is to learn as early on as possible what is going to work and what's not. So there's this constant feedback cycle that you want with your audience, whether that's your internal stakeholders or that's hopefully your end users. And so the faster and the cheaper that you can learn, the better. So all of these things are helping us to learn, is this going to fit with the market, product market fit? And so other things in that kind of solution design phase would be, you could write PR, product requirement documents, very quickly with an LLM, these sorts of things. And then sort of the fourth phase is around all of the development, the engineering side of it. And here we've got, the ability to write code now with LLMs. You've got agents that can monitor across the whole stack. And so there's just untold efficiency there again. And then the final phase, which if we've done the sort of the sprint to the start line with all of these other phases, this is where the marathon begins, which is then the launch, review, monitor phase, right? And again here, I think the big one is probably in terms of analyzing customer feedback. So it used to be a pain that you would get all of this feedback coming in and somebody would have to sit there and read all of these comments and analyze them. And now, of course, you can have LLMs summarize all of that feedback, group it, make suggestions, and you can incorporate it straight into your product backlog. So I think there's a huge amount of things that are changing with product management and AI. And I think particularly also in terms of leaders, as leaders in product management, there is a responsibility incumbent on those people who have responsibility and who have power to also bring the people with them. So who in your team actually needs some investment from an AI perspective, from a training perspective? Are you going to help them to stay up to speed, but also, understanding and thinking through the new risks that are being introduced as a result of creating AI-powered products. So, you know, there used to be always a human in the loop, or it used to only be a human user with your product. Now it could be an agent. It could be no human in the loop. What are the new risks that you're introducing there? So I think there's lots that's changing in the AI-powered product management space.
So you mentioned some interesting points there. The race to the start line.
Yeah.
So something I'm personally very passionate about is the question why, which is in many ways childlike and potentially irritating and annoying, but in the context of business and also business leadership, and the number of guests we had on, we've had the guys, James McQuivey from Forrester and various others who have talked about, from educational perspective as well, professors talking about how do people think, and from the business perspective, why. So instead of asking the question, how can I use AI? If we took the word AI out and we thought of it from a business perspective, what would the question be? Probably, how can we increase revenue? How can we deliver a better customer service? How can we reduce risk? So the questions why traditionally, I don't think have changed that much.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems the optics of adding AI into it,
Yeah.
it's almost skipping a step. So when you're talking about the race to the start line, if the fundamental underlying question isn't correct because it's blinded by the science of AI, then resources are deployed. People are trying to do things because they have the fear of missing out, and it becomes more of a psychological issue. And of course, traditional leadership, and you'll know, being at a leadership program at the bank where you started, and all throughout your life, and interviewing business leaders, they're not experts in artificial intelligence. In reality, very few people in the world are in its current form, because it's all new technology in the business world at the very least. So how would you go about ensuring the right questions are asked, and then using the skill set and product management and that entire process, of which you've identified numerous key points, to make sure that those efforts are directed towards a markable and measurable outcome, which a traditional business rationale can say, well, yeah, that's actually the metrics upon which success is measured.
It is a great point. And obviously, if you start with AI is the answer, now what's the question? You're asking the wrong, you started from the wrong place straight away. But AI can be powerful in terms of helping you get to some of the answers that you need to be asking. And also, it's worth saying that I've been in many a room where a senior leader has said, this is what we should be doing. And they get stopped in their tracks by, and what data do you have to support that that's a good idea? So I think the danger is obviously pet projects or hippo projects. And the real question is, so what's the customer pain point and how well can we understand that? So the way in which you can do that is you can say, hey, I used to have to walk to a taxi rank. I want that taxi to come to me. So what's involved in that? Oh, well, I need to know where that taxi is and where the person is, and I need to be able to locate those. Is there anything that I can do in terms of improving that process? Oh yeah, actually there's this thing called AI that can help us to look at the best possible routes and which ones are the closest, and to do that much faster than calling the cab rank and saying, hey, I'm on such and such a street. So now, machines can process some of that information much faster. But yeah, it's a bit like putting a baby in charge of a steamroller. If you're using AI in the wrong way, it can be super dangerous. And if your foundational rationale for why something is a good idea is wrong, you can waste a lot of money really quickly. And so yeah, it's
So
super key.
the next evolution of that thinking, POC versus productionization,
Hmm.
which very few people that I speak to do with AI or business seem to have the concept of. Do you want to elaborate on the difference between rapid POCs or any form
Hmm.
and productionization?
Yeah, I mean, the point of the POC is to learn what you don't know already, right? In terms of how can I de-risk quickly all other things that I still need to learn before I put something into production and spend a lot more. And at each stage of the process that I described, you can probably start multiplying by 10x the number of dollars that you're going to invest in getting there. And the fastest way to burn $1 million is to, get all the way to the end before you get some feedback. And so the point of the POC is to get feedback early on. Now, a proof of concept could be a sketch on a piece of paper that I could show you, and the cost of that conversation is your time and my time. Me drawing on a pencil with a piece of paper, and that could be some great feedback in terms of proof of concept. And so, if you read Eric Ries and Lean Startup, things like that, what is the minimum that you can do in order to get that feedback at every stage that will give you the confidence to proceed? And in business, what is the maximum amount of confidence that I can have in order to know whether it's worthwhile investing more dollars in this initiative, and what's the return that I'm going to get on that if we get it out into production? Ideally, you have some customers through that process who are with you closely following this process, even helping in the co-design of it, so that they actually become buyers of your product when it does come out.
So effectively, the best way to create the most advanced technology is with a whiteboard and a bunch of humans who are subject matter experts and have thoughts along with some critical thinking thrown in there. So you can really stress test the idea, the thinking. I always find that if you can have a decent whiteboard session and put forward the idea, it's like a little court case,
Mm.
and everyone puts their evidence forward, everyone debates, and can you break things? Can you destroy the rationale? And when everyone can reach the same conclusion and there are no negative, obvious, or thought out points left, and there's no reason that any of you, from your different perspectives, can come up with a rational or justifiable reason that it would fail, move to the next stage. Then it becomes monopoly, and in many ways, the pass go and all the challenges along the way.
Mm.
Your role is in many ways being like the grand master of monopoly of creating a product.
Yeah, I mean, the challenges that you get in business is, groupthink of, well, this is the way we've always done things around here. So this is
Business
the
as
way,
usual.
business as usual. And, they say the most dangerous phrase in the English language is this is the way we've always done things around here. So critical thinking, as you were saying, and getting people in the room and pushing things around is super important. The challenge of getting, the same people in the room is groupthink. And so that's why you want to make sure that you've got a diversity of stakeholders who are involved in that conversation. And so often the process is, well, don't just come up with one idea. When you start off with a process, it's like, okay, so quickly come up with lots of ideas as to how you could solve this identified pain point. It doesn't really matter. The boundaries of time and money and all of that doesn't really matter right now. Just come up with lots of ideas, because actually out of that will come a really interesting creative process and set of solutions. So don't just land the first idea and say, okay, yeah, let's go with that.
That's very similar to music production. And in a way, the job of a producer is to hear, to iterate, to listen, to try things intentionally that you also know won't work
Mm.
or shouldn't work.
Mm.
And assess constantly and ask the question, okay, does it work?
Mm.
That shouldn't work, but it does work.
Mm.
And you're picking out little points going, yeah, that resonates. That really resonates. Right, let's do more of that. Let's structure it. And you iterate. Is usually by the time a song is produced, you've done 60 iterations of the same song.
Well,
And if you put the first and the last go, they're completely different. But then you could see the evolution. And of course, you're looking for feedback loops.
yep.
Or have a listen to this, have a listen to this. And usually after every song or every session, you would bounce out a track and listen to it in your car. It's called a car test.
Hmm.
And you might have rubbish speakers in your car, but that's the point. Replicate the experience. The customer
Yep.
is actually going to listen to the product, and then think, yeah, does it work? Sounds great in the studio. Well, not everyone's going to listen to it in the studio. In fact, probably no one is.
Yeah.
So what's the real environment? So let's focus a little bit on what you're doing at Dow Jones and where data plays such an important role, because it's arguable that the future of AI is actually the good understanding of how to deal with data and all of its nuances.
Yeah. I mean, Dow Jones is founded on our news and business information that we curate. But Dow Jones also plays a dual role because Dow Jones is publisher and curator of content for distribution to other people as well. And so in many ways, we think Dow Jones is the perfect partner for publishers, especially in this transformation of the news and media industry. And Dow Jones is not there to disrupt that industry. It's there very much to use AI to empower and to enable both publishers, journalists, and also consumers. Therefore, we have different models for how we bring that news and business information, those journalistic truths that people depend on in order to make decisions, to market. And so, some of the publishers that we work with will allow us to use their news for generative AI use case, sometimes for data science use cases, sometimes only in our platform, sometimes off platform inside our client environments. And so we have different licensing models and different products and services in order to enable that.
And how do you deal with trust and truth? Because that's a core component of, obviously, an outcome of LLMs. It's traditionally been something to do with, can you trust the news or the data upon which the news is created on? Because I know you have strategies and you have ways of dealing with that, which probably is a value proposition within itself.
Yeah, I mean, we're going from a world where there was always a human in the loop with publishing news to potentially there being a world where new news is being created by agents. And so there's a huge shift going on and a huge transformation going on in this industry. Now, I'm not going to talk to the processes that are in the newsroom in our publishers, and I'm not suggesting that we're using agents to create news in any sort of form. That's not what we're doing. But there are new news sources that are being created in that way. And I think one of the interesting things to think about is, how does that shape our collective understanding of topics? So if LLMs are being trained on news, if they're being trained on content that's prevalent in various different media entities and on the internet, of course, then those that create the most news will eventually become part of this training set. And if that eventually becomes the system, as we're seeing, which becomes the bedrock of question and answer systems, of report generation systems, of our education systems, then there are important questions that we should be asking of, well, what sources and who's writing them and what process has gone into curating those data sets. And that's where somebody like Dow Jones comes in, because the sources that we have are trustworthy. They have been carefully curated. They are vetted. They are useful for creating those truthful answers to questions that people want to have the answers to.
Especially in business, and it goes back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, and exploring a topic thereafter that we can cover, which is more how to wider society consume information. But looking at it from a business perspective, a business tends to be something that is created to perform a function. I'm speaking very simple talk now. A luxury brand makes pretty shiny things and sells at a premium and has artistry in them. A food company will make food and sell it to supermarkets. A supermarket as a business will sell lots of food and various other items to customers. So the metric of success is usually very measurable. The same with a bank. And of course, there are different variations from investment banking to retail banking.
Mm.
But you understand there's a core function and there's probably ancillary functions supporting the goal of a business. If you didn't trust the data, and the other side of the same coin, from an organizational perspective, they don't want to share data which is protected under GDPR. They don't want to share confidential data.
Mm-hmm.
You end up in a position where data management, security, the infrastructure that is used, the understanding of how artificial intelligence is interacting, where does the data come from? Is there synthetic data? What's the data of the customer? Where's the opportunity and where's the risk? If it's very difficult to really understand that flow of information, which tends to be system-based, then where does the world end up in 1, 2, and 3 years if these topics haven't really been understood and subsequently implemented in what we consider everyday businesses?
Well, the first answer is that the kind of the transparency and the auditability of our news and business information is 100%. So whenever clients or users consume that within our platforms, it's very auditable. So you can see exactly the reference. When we share that information over API products or even over AI products with our clients, then again, it's fully auditable. And what we're seeing increasingly is people wanting to mix what you're alluding to of their own proprietary data with news and business information. And so there is this question of, well, either you send me your proprietary data and you trust me with that. Most clients say no to that. Or we send you and we license for particular use cases our news and business information so that you can integrate that into your own generative AI tools within your own environment. And so then they can mix and mingle with the attribution inside of their own environment. And so I think the most useful shift that I think we're going to see over the next, say, 3 to 5 years is actually not that suddenly corporate IT and the CIO has worked out what to do with AI. It's actually making AI the same and as prevalent and as ubiquitous as the internet, and making it everyday AI as opposed to just the role and the responsibility of the IT department. So when it becomes truly useful will be when it's more accessible to everyday Joe, Sarah, Frank, because it's so deeply integrated and it's so useful and usable and compilable into something that's useful to them as an individual. So I think that's probably one of the big shifts that we're going to see over the next 3 to 5 years.
And that's effectively value creation, but being cognizant of responsibility.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah.
So outside of that world completely, just as a human being, how do you think AI has changed? And maybe it's not AI. Maybe AI sits on top of the social media domain. How do you think humans have changed and are changing when it comes to the interaction with information and the influence of AI and potential future influence of AI in and around synthetic content, deepfakes, etc.?
Well, I think one of the key things is that, obviously, I think we're all aware that deepfake content is massively increasing, and whether that goes from just written content or audio content or even now visual agentic content. There's been something like a 500% increase in that kind of content since 2023. The worrying thing is that some research recently showed that I think 73% of people cannot distinguish sophisticated deepfakes. And this is where the problem starts to emerge, because of course there are useful ways of using this kind of technology, but there's this dual use problem with all of this, right? And so you could find good reasons for it to be used. So make a training video, and it's a very good representation of a human being, and now I can create training videos very quickly for lots and lots of people. I can change the language quickly and easily. But then there's the sort of the other side of that coin as well, in terms of leading people astray, making it seem as though some people are saying things that they're not actually saying. So I think the spread of misinformation, the rise of deep fakes, synthetic content, and how that gets layered into our public consciousness is going to be a story of our age. And I'm not sure that just watermarking something is going to be the answer to that just yet.
So I think the opposite to that is a potential increased value in humans, in the human experience, whether professionally, whether personally, whether from an entertainment perspective. How do you see that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think there is something about both long form content, but also the human touch. Talk about kind of being able to see that a document's been written by AI in terms of the structure that it takes on. So there's going to be, I think, increased value to humans spending time writing content. Sure, there is value in getting to something, to getting to an answer quickly. But I think there's also something about original thought in that, which is that essentially, can an LLM really create anything original, or is that still part of what it is to be human, is to actually create genuinely new thoughts? Because essentially, yes, they can be creative, but they are basically just learning from a training set. So everything has in some form been thought of previously, right? So I think you're right. I think there's a value on the human touch. There's a value on human in the loop, and should there be a premium on human created journalism versus machine created journalism? Absolutely.
Because equally, if you look at any particular role, and going back to the start of the podcast, when you describe all the particular parts of digital product management, and creating products and building products, it was something Professor Jim Collins said on a recent podcast. It was something in and around observing nature, whether that's looking at animals and looking at trees, looking at anything in nature, and getting inspiration and ideas about, well, how has nature figured out these problems? I mean, one of my favorite people to ever have lived was Richard Feynman. Seeing how he thought and how he observed creativity with a kind of sense of wonder. If there are real business problems, if you need to motivate a team of developers and you want to get an idea, well, there's a vision. I mean, people remember Steve Jobs as a visionary, but if Steve Jobs had the same personality as one of the sub characters in The Office, would we have seen Apple? And you think about it that way. It's the human leadership, people, even sales, keeping it very business. People buy from people they like. So to be motivated, to drive through adversity, because I know from personal experience of building software companies, it's really tough. And you've got all these different personalities. You've got lots of data. How do you interpret the data? And that could be more ring-fenced around your life experience. We could all see the same thing, but you see it differently than anybody else.
I think one of the privileges of having the podcast is you get to talk to lots of leaders and you get to ask them interesting questions. And one of the things that I've noticed through filming with lots and lots of leaders is leadership. Why do projects fail? Why do they succeed? It always comes down to leadership. It comes down to the vision. It comes down to the process that they follow. It comes down to their steady hand on the tiller, the clear North Star. And I agree with you 100% around leadership. And also with your point about nature and creativity, I think that's interesting. I was thinking recently, it's interesting that we are using AI to recreate human processes. But what if this kind of alien intelligence, as some people have called it, actually would function even better if it wasn't following traditional human ways of thinking? And I think there's a lot more to discover yet with this kind of AI. We call it a kind of an authentic intelligence within Dow Jones. But there's a lot more to discover yet in terms of what are the most efficient ways of coming to answers, or to discover new products, or to discover new materials, or to discover new ways of solving problems.
Because really, that's AI for opportunity. It
Mm,
seems everyone's focused on AI for efficiency
mm,
to begin with. And yes, there's a lot of efficiencies to be garnered, but efficiency probably comes at a cost of creativity and the human element. So actually, people in business could inadvertently take 5 steps backward because they've taken out the most valuable asset they don't realize they have.
mm.
So if you look at the opportunity side and you look at the people that you have in the organization, and you begin to look at, well, what makes them great and how do they think as opposed to sanitized f- flattened curve thinking, which effectively LLMs have personified average in
Mm,
many ways.
mm.
How can we really celebrate and explore under good leadership AI for opportunity?
I mean, there is, of course, the Kodak problem of not wanting to do yourself out of business. And I think maybe that is, in fact, holding back the AI revolution in some parts, because actually, if you think about what could be next, you think about the disappearance of user interfaces, right? And so at the moment, we're all kind of like staring at these screens. But if you think back 20 years ago, you had to go to a fixed place in order to phone somebody and remember the number, not just press a picture. And now we're still used to having to navigate a user interface. Well, with agents, of course, it becomes conversational direction. And so you no longer need to be an expert in learning how this software product is put together. And in the future, what if all user interfaces actually went away completely? What if it was a conversational thing? I mean, we're even moving to a world whereby our human bodies become the sensors for direction. So if you think about EMG sensors that you can fit on muscles and take instruction from them, tiny, tiny movements of intention, even from the brain being sent signals. And there's obvious applications to that in prosthetics. There's some great companies that are doing amazing things with prosthetics that we've had on our show. Just that connection point, and I've asked them, so how does your body actually connect with what is effectively a piece of robotic hardware? It's all through the intentionality of the muscles. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for us? Well, I think it's a revolution in form factor. We're going to see probably more of these devices that have no screens or less screens, less requirement to be sat stationary, and the ability to converse on the go. We have now devices in our rooms that we can talk to, add this to my shopping list, etc. But what if it's just this continuous ambient AI that follows us around? And I think we're all used to the fact that your phone is always listening, which is of course why you see the ads wherever you go after you've had that conversation about, oh, I really need a new lawnmower, and then suddenly it's popping up on your feed. But what if it became truly useful? So you're at home, oh darling, remember I'm working today and can't pick the kids up at 3 p.m, and the AI listening in sort of starts to process and looks at your schedule and says, oh, actually, that's going to be a conflict. You're half an hour to get to your kid's school, so you could probably take that call. That meeting is fine. You can do that in the car and you can talk, but once your child's in the car, you want to give them 100% of your attention, and so you're going to have to move and reschedule. I'll reschedule that for you at a time that's convenient for you and you. So you can kind of start to see this world that becomes much more intelligent and much more joined up as we interweave our lives together.
I think that's fascinating, and I would agree that's where a lot of it will definitely go. But there's one element which I think is relevant to what you're doing, but also the general consensus, and also my experience making films as well. Storytelling. The ability to communicate vast quantities of data. The limitation with speaking is you're rate limited by the comprehension of the words at a particular rate. And obviously we saw on YouTube, some YouTubers doing ridiculously fast, sped up, taking out every breath. So it sounds like you can have a nervous breakdown after 5 minutes listening to a podcaster who's tried to squeeze an hour's worth of conversation into rapid words. There's an emotional reaction of trying to say words too quickly. So definitely the senses of observing everything around and making sense of it, but communicating important, complex circumstances and situations, also depending on how people learn. Some people learn with words, some people comprehend with shapes and colors and visual. But that digital storytelling, how can you communicate without an interface? Or maybe it's a different type of interface, which is going to end up more Matrix-esque, where if you, from a creative standpoint, close your eyes, you imagine and you'll design in your mind, and you'll almost have like flashbacks of memories, or you'll just imagine things. Effectively, the human mind, for some people, I know it's not all, but at least a third of people, I would imagine, think visually. So how do you have an artificial intelligence-driven interface that can teach complex historical, current affairs, future predicted? Effectively, the visualization of the imagination is almost a completely different realm of artificial intelligence, as of yet unexplored, at least as far as being put into practice, which then also includes some sound and some language. But effectively, language is a part, but there's an entire universe of comprehension and opportunity and ability yet to come.
I agree. Yeah. Storytelling in itself is an interesting concept, isn't it? Because you can tell somebody facts and figures, but if you said, oh, well, the conditions were, it was dusty and it was hot and the sweat on their brow, and you start to get into the story with the person and you kind of become immersed in it, and somehow that helps you to remember those sorts of events or those stories and those facts and figures more. And so how can you do that? Well, obviously there are lots of technologies that can conduct straight in. So do we have to have a visual interface? I don't know. I think there are questions over cognitive load where an interface is useful. It's just that in the future it might not be needed. So like if the AI has already learnt my preferences, do I need on the whatever shopping site that I'm on to be able to compare and contrast 3 different types of triple ply toilet paper? Maybe not, because actually it already knows. Last time I bought that, just buy that. So I think there's that. I think in the world of media, news and journalism, the question becomes, do I need to read everything? Or do you just want to tell me when there's something important that I need to know that's relevant to me, to my competitor, to my industry, a key risk that's coming up? And people obviously complain about the vast amount of information that's available now because we're producing petabytes of it every day. And so the question becomes, how do we orchestrate a world around humans that becomes much more useful for them, so that they don't have to consume all of that news and information, but they just get the signals when they need it. And I think that's really where AI is going to help.
Because there's effectively two states. That one state is, let's say, reporting. So all the world's information summarized, contextually made appropriate to what is appropriate to you in this current time with this experience in the context of your life. So that's kind of the incoming. And then there's the interrogative element where still you want access to all that information, but you're driving. So it's either you're receiving, basically, yeah, well, I don't want to stray too much. I just want to know need to know basis effectively. And then the interface element is probably going to be more about, right, I want to go exploring and I want access.
Yeah.
So the facilitation of access to massive amounts of data, obviously then the trust and truth element comes in, many different aspects. But that's almost the bidirectional relationship.
Yep.
And the interface is required for one, for navigation, and the other, it's the diametrically opposed view of the same access to information in the world.
It reminds me of a story of a friend who went on a run and said, yeah, I had a 45-minute conversation with GPT-X, and I managed to get all my thoughts straight about this meeting that I was going into. And I was like, sorry, what? He's like, yeah, I just, through the multimodal, I was just able to chit chat away. Now this was, a year, 2 years ago. Like, people are like, it's moving quickly, and the ability to be able to have these really useful interactions where you can both receive the incoming but also give the outgoing, start to formulate. You can sit and have this conversation and say, well, what if this happened and what if that happened, and now add these factors in, and also do anything that I haven't thought about. Make sure you draw those things out, because I'm only human and you have the knowledge of the whole world. And so there is both. You're right. There's both the input and the output, but I think those interfaces are becoming easier and easier. And I think also, people think of LLMs and artificial intelligence as highly complex domains for super intelligent people. And the problem with that is that it becomes of lower benefit to most people, right? Now, actually, most people interact with AI on a daily basis, whether they know it or not, whether it's a maps interface or an email application, whatever it is. But the core value is going to be in actually democratizing the value that people get from intelligence. And what if actually the trick is that it's not about trying to keep it in this realm of complexity, but it's actually about simplifying it, and how that actually opens up the world again to maybe older folks, to be able to have these simple conversational interactions, or with younger folks. I still remember putting one of these sort of hockey puck shaped devices in front of my eldest child when these devices were first available, and saying, you can ask it anything, and it just looking puzzled at this device that was talking back. But now, of course, that's just their normal, isn't it?
It's fascinating, really. I mean, the age we're at, we've probably been through a redefinition of normal to the point, at some point, it won't be normal. But even your last points there goes back to why and who cares. And if we think of every walk of life, older generations and internationally as well, cultures are different. The environmental conditions in which we live in, and I know you've lived across the world, everywhere is not the same. There are nuances. Humans are humans, but there's so many different flavors and experiences and circumstances and derivative cultural differences. I know you've said something before the podcast, which fascinating point. What if AI was invented in Nigeria? How would the world look? How would we look at it? these are the kind of the ethical things we've got to look at. Two middle-aged white men, but that's not representative of the world as such.
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, we know that, take the medical industry for an example. We had the chief clinical information officer for Microsoft on, and I was able to ask him the question, um, given that the world is biased in terms of data collection towards white, typically male audiences for historical reasons, how is it that big tech companies like Microsoft can say that they can create appropriate technology solutions for everyone on Earth? And of course, he gave a great answer to that about not only how they work on diversifying their data sets, but also how they're working on partnerships to make sure that they're collecting a representative data sample in order to base all of their technology on. But of course, it's absolutely right. And the importance of diversity and opinion, especially in AI, is super important. And I think, again, we talk about AI as the domain of technologists, of engineers, of developers, data scientists, maybe product managers. But actually, we need ethicists, we need HR people, we need all walks of life, all genders, all races, all languages at the table, to be able to have this kind of honest conversation. And you're right. I said, made the observation previously that it was sort of notionally invented with a bunch of American professors in US universities, because that was the sample. The famous example is, how many women were there? One. What was her job behind the scenes? It's not representative, and so that in itself, that very start of AI has led with bias, and so it's on us as leaders in the industry to also make sure that that kind of thing is being corrected, and to bring in diverse voices into the room. And so, yeah, I pose that question. What if AI had been invented in Nigeria or in Malaysia? Like, who would be jumping up and down for fairness and for equity now? Well, it would be the white Western world jumping up and down. So, yeah, it's super important.
But I agree. AI is a human problem, and as humans, we live in the same world. Humans work, humans play sport, humans love, they entertain their dads, their mums, their kids. AI is not the domain specifically because of, as you say, of technologists, because if it affects everyone and it becomes a resource or a capability in the same way that electricity does, you can't say electricity is only the domain of electricians, because everything around us in which our lives operate in every capacity, business and personal, is affected. And if we can help the public understand and break down the barriers, because the amount of times I've heard people say, oh, well, I'm no expert in AI. So it's almost like you're not allowed an opinion. Well, why? Why shouldn't everyone have an opinion? Because a very experienced person with a lot of knowledge in a particular domain has every entitlement to have an opinion of how AI will affect their industry or their life or their culture. And I think we need to be just open the doors really for people not to be afraid to hold a viewpoint and to say, well, how does this affect my and our life? How does it affect our industry, our business?
Yeah.
And everyone has their own particular perspective
Yeah.
and has every right to question things.
Yeah. I mean, I think as we look ahead to the future, I think we'll see more of these sort of ChatGPT moments as AI becomes available in a more everyday format. So if AI, has been around for decades, as we started off with, right? It's not like it's a brand new thing, but in its current form, in the way that it's become accessible to people over the last 2 or 3 years, it's become democratized in terms of usefulness. And I think we'll see more and more of those kinds of leaps. I think there'll be more and more turbulence ahead in terms of some of those leaps and some of those advances, and questions over, should AI be able to do that? Should it be able to have applications in those sorts of settings? But mainly, I think I have hope for a future that where humans are powered by AI to do more and more useful things, and to live more valuable lives, and to be able to discern and to explore more than we ever could before, and to understand about the world around us and about people. But I think the key thing will be making sure that humans stay at the center of everything that we do with AI.
Well, Chris, I could not agree more. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Cheers.